We are going to be going to court for the trial of Duane Keffe D Davis. Emily, what is this trial about? The murder of Tupac in September 1996. This is a trial because of the defendant's ego. Defendant Keffe D published this tome called Compton Street Legend that came out at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. He was indicted in this case in 2023, in large part based on the evidence that they had already gathered and his statements in this book. So he wrote this book, it seems to me, to convince everyone that he's not the snitch they say he is, and at the end of the day, just self-snitched, to the point that he is now being prosecuted for murder. No, he is not the gunman. No, he did not pull the trigger. He is being prosecuted on an aiding, abetting gang theory. There are gang allegations in this case. You're going to learn a lot about the Southside Compton Crips, Grape Street, and others. Everyone else that was in the car with Keffe D that night is dead. He is the only one that is still in the car that shot into Tupac's car and killed Tupac that night. He is alleged to have provided the gun. He is alleged to have been the shot caller that night, greenlighting this. The allegation in Keffe D's book is that it was Sean, Puffy, P. Diddy, Combs, and we're dealing with 1996. So Puffy is going to be called Puffy circa 1996. He's not yet Diddy. Either way, he's also on the witness list. Real easy to bring him in from prison if they want to. But the allegation from Keffe D is that as Bad Boy Records were starting with Sean Combs, he said, I need y'all to take out Suge, Death Row Records, and Tupac. We'll see what happens. But his book, the judges ruled, can be used against him. There will be some LAPD interviews from back in the 90s that will be used. We're going to see, I imagine, a lot of retired LAPD gang detectives. We're going to see hotel footage and video footage from that night. He also included a lot of pictures in the book. So he's trying to say, it seems in motions, that he wasn't even in Vegas that night. However, he included in his book photos of them going to the fight that night. So between that security footage and him saying in his book exactly which hotels they were staying at, I imagine that they will be able to prove that he was in fact in Vegas that night. He talks a lot about Suge Knight in this book. He talks some shit about Suge Knight in this book. So we have got a why in the world did you write that all down book going to trial for first-degree murder.
On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur came to Las Vegas to attend a Mike Tyson fight. After the fight, Tupac, along with Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and other people that were with that group, ran into a person named Orlando Anderson. And Orlando Anderson is the defendant's nephew. And when they encountered Orlando Anderson sitting by himself, they attacked him. And that attack was captured on video. Then, a few hours later, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight drive down Flamingo Road to Club 662, where Tupac is scheduled to perform a concert. Then 2.5 hours later, after Tupac and Suge engaged in the beating of Orlando Anderson, they are gunned down. Tupac is gunned down in a drive-by shooting from a white Cadillac in an act of revenge. During those 2.5 hours, you will learn that the defendant was escalating and planning the retribution for the beating of his beloved nephew. Now, let's be clear. Duane Davis did not pull the trigger. But what he did do was plan the retaliation for the beating of his nephew. You will learn that Duane Davis got the gun. You will learn that he got into a white Cadillac. You will learn when the opportunity presented itself for retribution, Duane Davis made sure that the shooters were armed and ready to execute their revenge. And remarkably, you will learn that from Duane Davis himself. Compton is about 10 square miles, but in the mid-1990s, those 10 square miles were occupied by over 30 gangs claiming its territory. And important to this case, there are two gangs, Mob Piru and the Southside Compton groups. The Mob Piru is a group that associated with the color red. And you'll hear that Suge Knight, the person who was driving Tupac Shakur that night, grew up in the neighborhood of Mob Piru. But by the mid-1990s, he had become a very successful CEO of the record label Death Row Records. But despite, or maybe because where he came from, you'll hear that Suge Knight continued to employ Mob Piru gang members as part of Death Row. They would act as unofficial security, and other times they would engage in, let's call them other acts, on behalf of Suge Knight. And in 1996, Tupac Shakur was maybe the largest and biggest, most successful rapper around. He had just sold, released All Eyes on Me, a double album that was met with huge success. Additionally, Tupac Shakur was a movie star, having appeared in a number of movies in critically acclaimed roles. When it comes to Southside, Duane Keffe D Davis was the leader of the Burris Street faction of the Southside Compton Crips. Duane Davis rose to prominence in his neighborhood because he was a very successful, large-scale drug trafficker. The other thing you'll learn is that Orlando Baby Lane Anderson was his nephew, and also a highly respected member of the Southside Compton Crips. Now, as part of this case, you're going to hear another name, Eric Zip Martin. Now, Eric Zip Martin is not a member of the Southside Compton Crips. In fact, he's based out of New York. He's involved in the drug trade and knows Duane Davis as a result of both their involvements in the drug trade. Duane Davis from the West Coast, Eric Zip Martin from the East Coast. And one of the connections that Duane Davis gets through his association with Zip Martin is with Sean Puffy Combs, who was then the CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment. Sean Combs wanted some security when he came out to the West Coast. He was worried about Mob Piru. He was worried about the members of Death Row Records. And so Duane Keffe D Davis agreed to be around to act as unofficial security for Sean Combs and his artists when they came out west. So that brings us back up to September 7th, 1996. And in that white Cadillac, before the shooting occurs, Duane Davis explains that the driver is Terrence T. Brown. In the rear driver's side is DeAndre Dre, or Big Dre Smith. In the rear passenger side is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And Duane Davis himself, KVD, is in the front passenger side. After Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur's vehicle is shot, Suge Knight makes a U-turn and heads back to the Las Vegas Strip. The car ultimately can go no further and stops. Police arrive, medical arrive, and you will hear that Suge Knight was grazed in the head and had some glass going in his neck. He ultimately survives those injuries and is released fairly quickly. You'll also hear that Tupac Shakur was shot multiple times, that he was brought to UMC, and that 6 days later, he succumbed to those injuries. And the war that follows at Compton is a bloody one. You'll hear that Mob Piru and Southside Crip members start shooting at each other. Within 10 days, 3 people are killed. A number of people are shot, including an 11-year-old girl. And what you'll also learn is that none of those cases were prosecuted. Why? Because in this context, in the gang context of this, the combination of gangs and guns is scary. And in this world, silence means survival. Now, the one person who has a hard time being silent is Duane Davis. You're going to hear from 1998 to 2023, Duane Davis has given a number of statements regarding this case. So, as early as 1998, Davis spoke to the FBI. He admitted he was in Las Vegas during Tupac's murder, but he denies being responsible. Then in 1999, Davis speaks to the FBI again. And these aren't interviews that are focused on the Tupac Shakur murder. These are interviews regarding drug transactions and drug trafficking. But he does say that Tupac does come up, and Duane Davis admits to being in Las Vegas for Tupac Shakur's murder. Says he wasn't involved, but he was mad about the fact that Orlando Anderson was beaten, and that his plan was to handle it in Compton had Tupac survived. Then in 2008, the interview of clips we've heard today, in a secret interview with the federal task force, Davis admits to his role in the murder of Tupac Shakur. In 2009, Davis is being so helpful to federal authorities that he actually flies out to New York to try and get Zip Martin to implicate himself in the Tupac Shakur murder. In 2011, the landscape changes. Because in 2011, Greg Kading, the guy who was leading the task force in 2008, the guy who organized the secret proffer between Duane Davis and the federal task force, he leaves law enforcement and decides he's going to publish a book about his investigation into Biggie Smalls, the guy who was killed 6 months after Tupac, and Tupac Shakur. And what he puts in the book is that Duane Davis confessed to the murder of Tupac Shakur. Remarkably, in 2019, Duane Davis then decides he's going to publish his own book. And with regards to the book, it is certainly a lot of self-aggrandizement. But again, the core remains. He was mad about Orlando Anderson about the beating of Orlando Anderson, his nephew. He was in Las Vegas. He got the gun. He was in the white Cadillac, and he handed the gun to the sheriff. And what you'll notice, a constant thing that always goes through these statements, is Duane Davis's visceral anger at Tupac Shakur for putting hands on his nephew. In the book, he says, them jumping on my nephew gave us the ultimate green light to do something to their ass. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur publicly, on camera, participated in a humiliating beating of Duane Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson. Duane Davis knew that in his world, that required a response. And over the years, in private interviews, in public statements, and even in private calls, Duane Davis has repeatedly told us over and over again about the anger he felt and his own role in the revenge drive-by shooting of Tupac Shakur. And now, nearly 30 years later, we're going to ask you to finally hold Duane Davis accountable. Thank you.
Now, what the state has just told you, what they believe to be the evidence in this case. But really, at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself if what they're saying is really truth or fiction. Fact or fiction. Now, I'm going to give you a timeline here for you to understand just a little bit of how this is going to work, because there's so much evidence in this case that we have to sort of compartmentalize some things. And what I've done is really just sort of focused on the 3 detectives that work this file from beginning to now. First detective you will hear about is Detective Becker. He works the file. He's the original detective on the scene. Detective Long takes over the case for about 15 years or so. And then it ends with Detective Mogg, who presents this to the grand jury in 2023. But why this timeline is relevant is because you have to see the span of time for yourself. 30 years. And ask yourself this: what facts do they have after 30 years? And with regard to Detective Becker, what he'll tell you is police officers write reports. Critical. Hugely important. Why? Because at some point in the future, like in this case, 30 years later, Detective Becker will not remember details like he would if he had, what? His report in front of him. And that's going to be important for you to consider in this case. Now, what Detective Becker does, though, is because of the outcry, the attention, the media focus on this case, he took his file and he secured it in his office under lock and key. Because he was worried about leaks in Metro leaking information out to the public. Because so many people wanted to know answers to the question as to what happened and who did this to Tupac Shakur. Now, what you're going to find is, when Detective Becker testifies in this case, is that a lot of his reports are now missing. They're gone. Which is Metro's responsibility to hold and to pass on to the next detective, and then finally to the next detective. Now, Detective Becker also did not trust Compton PD. Why is that important in this case? Because there's an individual by the name of Reggie Wright Sr. He was a lieutenant working in Compton in charge of the gangs in Compton in terms of investigations. His son is Reggie Wright Jr. He was the head of security for Death Row Records, the same security that was here in Las Vegas on the 9th of September 7th, 1996. Death Row Records was affiliated with Mob Pyru Blood, and Detectives Ladd and Brennan from Compton answered directly to Reggie Wright Sr. Becker did not trust Compton PD. And the one thing that he really didn't trust is that most of their information came from confidential informants that were not reliable. And he'll tell you that. And because of his intuition, Compton PD was shut down in September of 2000 due to internal corruption. They just evaporated that police department, and the sheriff's department for LA County absorbed the responsibilities for the police department in Compton because of the corruption that was there. Now what facts, right? Just like the pads of paper that you have in your hand and the pens that you have in your hand, what facts can we determine from Detective Becker's efforts? First and foremost, we know that Tupac was shot multiple times. That's a fact. That can be proven. We know that it was with a .40 caliber firearm. That's a fact, due to the cartridge casings. On the corner of Flamingo and Cobalt. That's also a fact. Right? We're on board so far? We know the date, September 7th, 1996. That is a fact. At 11:17 p.m., we know that to be a fact as well. And then finally, that he was in a vehicle during rush at night, and that Tupac died 6 days later. Those are facts that will not be refuted by anybody in this courtroom during the time that we spend together. But here's the one thing. There are no facts to point to Keffe. Detective Long takes over the case in 2002, and he has it from 2002 to 2017. He was, interestingly enough, on the gang unit, and at the time of the shooting, he was in gangs, and he had been one of the first to arrive on scene. He will testify and tell you that every time he did something on this file, he wrote a report. Because that's important. That's what we do as a police officer. And he conducted follow-up interviews, and he made some travel to Compton. But here's what Detective Long does. He interviews Keffe in 2009. Sits him down, has an interview with Keffe, just like the state said. And guess what happens? Detective Long doesn't even know that Keffe had actually spoken to a task force the year before. How is that possible? Metro is the agency responsible for the investigation of Tupac Shakur's murder, and they don't even know about this. No one in that room in 2008 told Detective Long or Metro what was going on. Keffe was never charged for any of what he said during that time period. And it's because they knew he was full of crap. Otherwise they would have. Why wouldn't they? When Detective Long comes back to Las Vegas, he goes and he talks it over with the Clark County District Attorney's Office. You know what happened then? They didn't charge the case either. In 2009. ask yourself the reason why that is. Is because they just didn't care about Tupac Shakur or his life? Or is it because they looked into it and realized we can't verify this information, we don't believe this to be true? Why would the Clark County District Attorney's Office not charge him in 2009? Now, what facts do we get out of Detective Long based upon what he did for those 15 years? We don't have any facts. Outside of statements made, allegedly by KVD and other people, we don't have anything to verify any of that information. What you will learn is that Detective Mogg basically says, I'm here just to close out the case. He's not here to solve the mystery of who killed Tupac. So with everything you have in front of you that you're now hearing for the first time in terms of the statements that were made in 2008, 1998, 1990, whatever, Detective Mogg comes along and says, I'm just here to close out the case. That's his role. Keffe writes a book, allegedly. Right? Allegedly, he writes this book called Compton Street Legend in 2019. You know what happened with the book? Right? Even he confesses to it. What you find is, no charges filed. What is going on? District Attorney's Office doesn't want to charge the case. No charges filed when the interview happens. No charges are filed when the book is written. What is going on? 5 years goes by. And nothing is going on with the case. But Detective Mogg says he's closing it out. Detective Mogg turns around and applies for what's called a search warrant. And what he does in that search warrant application is he assures the judge, hey, what we are looking for is in the home. The thing that's going to help us solve this crime, who killed Tupac, is in the home. And he signs an affidavit, and that's important. I want you to remember this. He signs an affidavit attesting to what he's saying to this judge to be true and correct. What he says is, I think we have evidence in Keffe D's home that will solve the murder of Tupac. So up until this point, they've got all these statements, they can't be corroborated. So now they're saying, we have evidence in this home that we think probably is in the home. And as a result, we're going to find this evidence. It's going to help us solve this case. What I want to tell you right now is they don't find it. And in the meantime, Detective Mogg retires. He now becomes Mr. Mogg. And Mr. Mogg goes to the grand jury. Mr. Mogg is sworn to testify truthfully. And you know what Mr. Mogg does? He just reads pages of the book into the record. He doesn't do any more in terms of an investigation than read pages of a book into the record. He walks up, gets on the stand, and reads the book as if it's the gospel truth. And that's what he does. He treats that book like it's fact. Now, what you're going to find out about Mr. Mogg is that he never wrote a report. So when he took over the case in 2017, all the way up until when he retired in 2023 and was in front of the grand jury, he never wrote a report. Not one time. Not like Detective Becker, and not like Detective Long, and not like any other police officer who does their job. This man never writes a report. In fact, what happens is he transitions, right? He's Metro detective, he retires, and then he gets a job working as an independent contractor for the district attorney's office as an investigator. And as an investigator, he doesn't have any police power. He continues to work as a lead detective on this case. Even though the procedure is you hand your file and your officer's report to the next detective in line. That's how this works. But he keeps the file for himself and he starts billing against the file after he retires as a detective with Metro. Because now he's an independent contractor. That's important to know. Why is that important? Because what the evidence is going to show you is that he backloaded his work. And when he finally writes a report, it's not an officer's report, it's an investigative report that spans from 2018 to current, and we just received it about 5 weeks ago. What I'm going to tell you right now is what you're going to find when you listen to all the evidence, that his work was biased, sloppy, and incomplete. Those are the three things you're going to determine for Mr. Mock. Now, because of the fact that in terms of the evidence itself, he doesn't have much, the state's going to lean pretty heavily on their witnesses. And I want to give you a sampling of the type of people you're going to run across. First person is this guy named Reggie Wright Jr. He's the, remember, the security company for Death Row Records. And what he is a felon. Second of all, you're also going to find that he's a former Compton police officer. He worked for Compton PD for about 5 years, and apparently he got disabled. At some point, he becomes a felon. You're going to learn about that. And his father, like I said before earlier, Reggie Wright Sr. was the head of the Compton PD gang unit. What you're also going to learn about Reggie is that, once again, he was supposed to be protecting Suge Knight. Where was he the night of the shooting? In addition to that, he orders his security team to not carry firearms the night of the shooting, before the shooting took place. What you're also going to learn is, he wasn't even around when the shooting occurred. So the principal, meaning the person he should have been protecting the most, would have been Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records. This man was nowhere to be found. He was sitting at a club called 662 down the street, waiting for Suge to show up, while he left his people that were working for him unarmed in the vehicles behind Suge Knight. In addition to that, when everything was said and done, Suge Knight went to prison because he was not supposed to be in a fight in Las Vegas. He violates his release. Guess who takes over Death Row Records? Reggie Wright Jr. In addition to that, you're also going to learn about a disgraced LAPD detective by the name of Greg Cady. The state told you about him. He wrote a book. He benefited off of what was happening with regards to Keffe. Now, Greg Cady, he stole the file. What you're going to learn is he actually stole the file. He took the Tupac and the Biggie case files and walked out the door. This is an LAPD detective that they are using, or one of the people that they're going to be focusing on to establish their case. When you look at this relevant timeline again, and you see the length of time, ask yourself, what facts do they have to even put Keffe D in a car in Las Vegas on September 7th, 1996? What facts? When you look at the video that happened at the MGM, look for them. Try to find them in there. Try to find any of the other individuals. Remember, he said there's 3 individuals in the car with him and Orlando Anderson. Orlando's in the video because he's getting beat up. Find any of the other individuals on the videos of the MGM. Look for evidence that shows that Keffe D was even in Las Vegas on the night of the fight. Receipts, credit cards, a picture of him standing next to somebody else, maybe watching the fight from another casino. Something. Give me something. In the book, you're going to learn that Keffe says that he was at the fight. He was sitting on the second row. He was sitting with all the celebrities, and he's dressed in his finest gear. There's not one iota of proof that he was ever at that fight. But you know who does show an iota of proof that he was at the fight? Suge Knight. Suge Knight was raided, and at some point, there is a ticket stub to that fight, the Tyson versus Selden fight with Suge Knight's possession. Because he went to the fight. And you would think, a fight like this, you want to show everyone that you were at the fight. There's no evidence at all that man was even at the fight. Keffe D was known to do this. That's the testimony you're going to hear in this case. That's what you're going to hear about that man right there. And so you have to ask yourself the question. If I just say things, is that going to end up being one of those things where I'm going to be hemmed up for a murder if I just keep repeating the fiction? I keep repeating that? The answer is no. You have to corroborate everything I say in order for it to be true. Otherwise, it's just that. Or fiction. And at the end of all the time we spend together, what you're going to find is that the state cannot prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt the claim that Keffe had anything to do with a first-degree murder with use of deadly weapon. There's no facts to that matter. Thank you.
We have gone through opening statements from the prosecution and the defense in the Keffe D trial for the murder of Tupac in Las Vegas, September 7th, 1996. The defense, we're just going to go in reverse order. The defense very early on made clear that their kind of theme of the case is going to be fact or fiction. I think it is easily memorable. I think it's something that when you talk about this opening statement later this week, next week, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, what you're going to take away and remember from the defense opening statement is it fact or is it fiction? How come nobody wrote any reports and everything my client says is bullshit? And the witnesses will tell you that my client is a bullshitter. And also some of the main witnesses for the state have some serious problems. So be sure to ask them some questions, including detective wrote the book. Yeah, stole the file. Stole the file. Oh, and also had some issues with like coercing witnesses. So make sure you just keep that in mind before that detective who they're relying on goes ahead and testifies. Sure, but what shows that Keffe D was even there? How do we know he was in Vegas? How do we know that the things he said in his book are true? Because guy's a liar. He's a bullshitter. You know, we just, as one does, it's entertainment. It's hyperbole. And the state's opening was, hey, you have to understand the background that was coming out of Compton and the battle that was brewing between not just Death Row Records and Suge Knight and Bad Boy Records and Diddy or Puffy, because 90s, so Puffy is what's going to come up in all the interviews. But you also have to understand that there was a fight in the Lakewood Mall that involved the nephew of Keffe D, but it was laying the groundwork for everything boiling over in Vegas when both the Suge Knight and his crew were in Vegas. He was a part owner or full owner of Club 662. Tupac was going to be performing there after the Tyson fight. So they were all in Vegas, but also Keffe D's Southside Compton Crips had also rolled to Vegas. And Keffe D's cousin had gotten jumped in the MGM Grand. It was on security footage. It ended up all over the news. And that had to be answered for. What Keffe D talks about in the book that we have not heard discussed in opening, and we will probably hear from the defense, not the prosecution, is whether or not Puffy actually asked the Southside Compton Crips to kill Suge Knight and Tupac. But the defense might leave it out because the defense is saying, hey, we don't know why they would do this. The prosecution is saying this was a gang retaliation. This was not a ordered hit from somebody else. This was not like a murder for hire, though they might have been willing to take Puffy's money for it. They were going to do this because of the beating or the jumping of the nephew. So that was something that had to be answered for. And Keffe D is the one that was calling the shots. Keffe D is the one that brought the weapon. Keffe D handed the weapon to the shooter. And from the two cars that were involved in this shooting, only two people are still alive, Keffe D and Suge Knight.
Sir, back in September of 1996, how were you employed?
I was working for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department at that time.
And how long did you wind up working for Metro?
25 years total.
September 7th of 1996, what was your assignment?
I was assigned to a bike team on bicycles on the Strip.
While you were working on that area of the Strip, did you cause there to be some sort of car stop of a vehicle?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the purpose of stopping this vehicle?
I initiated a car stop on a black BMW that had no license plates.
When you approached the vehicle, did you recognize the occupants?
No, I did not.
Why did you stop this vehicle?
It had no
plates.
license plate on the back.
When you approached the vehicle, did the occupants communicate with you?
Yes.
And did you, at that point, did you learn their identity?
They told me who they were, but just as identifying them, not.
Did you know them?
No, I
when
did
they
not.
told you their names?
They told us their names because we asked them their names, but I didn't know them. I had no knowledge of them before that. We ID'd them.
As you sit here today, do you recall who they were?
Yeah, Tupac Shakur and Marion Knight.
Suge.
In particular, Mr. Shakur is wearing or has on a very large gold necklace.
Yes.
Did you talk to him about that necklace?
Yeah, we talked to him for a few minutes out there, and I just remarked to him, "Wow, man, that's a huge piece of gold or something like that he had around his neck."
Would you describe your interaction with them as congenial?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ask them about the license plate, why their vehicle had no license plate?
Yes, I did.
And what was the response?
They stated that they were filming a video, so they had taken the license plate off because they were filming a video going up and down the strip.
This large gold medallion is what we're talking about, correct?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that is a big gold medallion.
How did that interaction with Mr. Knight and Mr. Shakur end?
We told them that they were going to have to put the plate back on their car, and we warned them and released them.
Fast forward about, let's say, 10 minutes later, something unusual happened.
Oh boy.
What happened?
We were continuing riding on the strip area. We were heading southbound on the boulevard, and we heard some calls come out about a vehicle. Can't remember exactly what was said, but heading up towards Harmon, we saw the vehicle that had been described in the median of the road. It looked like it had ran up on the median and
The median?
stopped there.
What do you do when you see that?
We approached the vehicle.
Is it you and Mr. Goldgart, or
Mr.
Officer
yes,
Goldgart?
Officer Goldgart and I.
And do you see either of the two people that you saw earlier in the vehicle?
Yes.
And who is that?
Marion Knight was outside of the vehicle, walking around, talking, and Tupac Shakur was being removed by EMS people.
As Marion Knight is talking, do you recall anything he's saying?
He was telling us to take care of Tupac Shakur. Marion Knight had a chunk of shrapnel or something in his head. He was bleeding, and when I went up to talk to him, he was adamant that we needed to go and care for Mr. Shakur.
Did you then go to Mr. Shakur?
Yes, I did.
And then what do you do? What's your responsibility as it relates to Mr. Shakur as the EMT is working on?
I was trying to talk to him to find out what had happened. Excuse me. Gather information to see who had fired at them.
Did you wind up riding anywhere with Mr. Shakur?
Yes, I rode to the hospital in
And
the
during-
ambulance with him.
During that time period, between the time you get to Mr. Shakur and the time period he gets taken into the hospital, are you able to have any sort of communication with Mr. Shakur?
He was still talking, and I was trying to convince him to tell me the name of whoever his assailants were.
I imagine
And
he wasn't
did
going to
he
do
ever
that.
respond?
Yes, he responded, no, we'll take care of it. So, something like that.
Said, no, we'll take care
We'll
of
take
it.
care of it, something like that.
And that's the only thing you were able to gather from Mr. Shakur.
Yeah, I couldn't get him to talk to me any further than that.
And why'd you come to Las Vegas that weekend?
Well, when you live in LA, you go to Vegas all the time. It's just a party city. So we decided to go for the weekend. We were all off work. And so we went to come hang out, have fun.
What did you do after hanging out at the MGM Grand?
Well, we had met one of my friends, and they had mentioned there was somewhere they were going to go. So we decided, okay, we'll go there first and see what's happening before we decide, where we're going to end the night. So we all got back in our car, the rented car we took from LA, and drove.
And do you recall what kind of car that was?
It was a convertible Supreme.
And
Cool.
did all four of you go into the car?
Yes, all four of us were in the car. We got in the car. I believe we left the MGM parking lot, and then we went to the main street, Las Vegas Boulevard, I guess. And we were driving, and I believe we were, I don't know, about 10 minutes after leaving the parking lot, and then we ran into Suge and Tupac in the car. We were driving, hanging out in a convertible. And my girlfriend, Lauren, at the time, she knew Suge, and she told us, hey, there's Suge, pull up next to him. I'm going to ask them what they're doing. And so Shalane was the driver, and she slowed up close to them.
And so you said Shalane was the driver.
Yes.
Where were you seated?
I was a passenger in front.
In the front passenger? So Shalane's driving, you're in the front passenger, and the other two women are in the back seat?
Yeah, Tanisha's behind me, and then Lauren is behind the driver.
And so then when you start driving, when you see Suge and your friend starts talking to Suge, what happens?
They were talking and she was like, what's going on? What's happening? We look over initially, we pull up to the car and we kind of nod or say hello, that kind of thing. But we were in our own little world. While she was talking to him, he said, hey, we're all going to the club. Why don't you follow us? Get behind us. You can go with us. And so that was decided we'll go there first and see what's happening before we go anywhere else.
So do you follow, do you remember who's driving and who's in the passenger side?
Suge was driving and Tupac was in the passenger seat.
And then what did you do? Did you guys start driving over to Club 66?
We got behind them and we start driving down the Las Vegas Strip. And it was weird because there was a car behind us and they kept going around us trying to get in front of us. It happened quite often. It was really annoying. We didn't understand what was going on. And then at one point we were getting ready to turn to go on the main street. I guess Flamingo was on. Or Flamingo, I think is what it's called. When we turned that way, I was like, what the heck's going on? People keep getting in front of us. I know how to get to the club. Let's figure out our own way. I can drive and we can meet them up there. And so our plan was to get out from behind them.
So you were confused about the way the cars were moving?
Yeah, I didn't understand. In hindsight, I know now, but I didn't understand there was entourage. I just thought, they were going to the club. We didn't think about it.
And then at some point on Flamingo, do you stop at a light?
Yeah, so when we get close to the light, I tell Shalane, pull over, I'll drive. I know where I'm going. I've been there before. So we pull from around them, and then we stop at the light, and
before, that's my fault, not yours. So before, when you guys are stopped at the light, where is your car relative to Suge Knight's and Tupac Shakur's car?
So I believe there was 4 lanes, a turning lane, the lane next to it, the middle, and then there was one for like the outside lane. So they were on the 3rd lane, I believe, and when we got off the lane behind them, we got out and we went past, and I think we were a car or 2 on the 2nd lane from the light.
And so were you behind or in front of Suge Knight's car?
We were in front.
So you're in the lane next over, a car, or maybe 2 in front.
Yeah, exactly.
Then while you're waiting at that light, does anything happen?
Well, me and Shalane were going to change seats. I was going to drive. I'm the more aggressive driver. And after what, she was nervous with them coming back in front of us so much.
She's like, girl, I got this. Let me drive.
So me and Shalane were literally head down, taking our seatbelts off.
Yeah.
When we heard the gunshots.
Ooh.
All hell broke loose.
And to be fair, you didn't see those gunshots.
No.
And then what do you do when you hear the gunshots?
I freak out and I scream, what the hell? I said, what the hell? And then Shalane is kind of half up, half down. And so I grab her head to bring her down. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And then she has her hand on the wheel, but she's like frozen. And so I don't remember how many gunshots there were, honestly. But I know I put the car in drive. And I told her, get the hell out of there and drive. And so I may even grab the wheel. Like I said, I'm very aggressive. And
get the fuck out of here, girl.
She tried to drive off.
And then did you see the color of the vehicle?
Yeah, so we almost hit the car. When we were trying to drive off, there was a car in the lane, that last lane, that was the turning lane. And it was a white 4-door. Can't tell you what kind, but I just know it was like white-ish. And we almost hit it when we were trying to get away.
Were you trying to pursue the white car?
Hell no. Just want to get away.
And then where did you guys go? Did you turn off? Did you follow them turning off? Or?
We turned off. We turned the only way you could turn because it was a red light, which was down that first street past. And then when we turned right, we were just driving fast. There still might have been gunshots. I can't speak for anyone else in the car, but there was a lot going on. There was a lot of adrenaline. And then the first street we saw that was on the left, I was like, turn left. And we just turned down a random street that had like apartments on it.
Yeah, this woman's situational awareness is 10 out of 10. She grabbed her friend and was like, get down, put the car in drive, and was like, go, 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 get the fuck out of here. Also, different than other witnesses we have seen, you can see how she's walking through the testimony with her hands, like this is where we were driving, this is where we were going, and how just consistent and smooth her testimony is.
Now, It's fair to say you didn't see who was in the car, right?
No, didn't look.
Yeah,
But
wanted to get the
did you
fuck
go
out of there.
back to where the shooting occurred?
Yes, I did.
Were you nervous about talking about what happened?
I didn't think I had anything valuable to say, to be honest. So I wasn't nervous initially because I just was like, we came back because just when we wondering what happened. Because we left, so we didn't know. We didn't look around. We didn't see anything. We just left. And so when we came back, we saw there were a lot of police presence. And I wasn't a big fan of the police at the time, so I was like, I want to stop and talk to them and offer my help, but I also want to make sure if I could help, I would help. So when we went back, we told the officers we had been there when something happened. What happened when we left? And so he made us stop the car and get out the car. The police officer made us sit on the ground on the sidewalk in front of everything. Like cars are still, I think, may have been passing. So it was kind of an odd situation where they were like kind of rude to us, and then they're treating us like we're suspects. We really didn't know what happened though. And so they said, well, we need you guys, eyewitnesses, we need you guys to come downtown or in a van for you guys to come, and had us sit there. I kept asking a lot of questions, but no answers.
Now, you were describing for us a little bit about where the cars were. If I were to give you a piece of paper, can you draw for us just a little bit better so we can have a better view? And
I can try.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Where you have Coble is actually the street Coble. Is that right?
Yes.
And you have Flamingo, which would be the other street that's going vertical down the Defense Exhibit A.
Yes.
And then on the corner, it would be one of the corners. There's a gas station.
Yes.
Now over here, this S, that would be what you would call a Suge Knight's vehicle.
Yes.
And you were directly behind that vehicle at some point.
Yes.
And you pulled up, and that's the arrow pointing up to the next lane over, and that's where you were at, right next to Suge's vehicle.
In front of, not next to. That's why it's a little above.
It's a little.
I see. So you're slight.
I mean, that black BMW had some pretty identifiable rims, so it doesn't surprise me that they recognize the vehicle.
In front of Suge's vehicle. Was there another vehicle over here in front of Suge's vehicle?
I'm assuming yes, because we weren't at the front of the line. So yes, maybe two.
I see. Maybe two vehicles, but presuming that there would be at least a vehicle in front of Suge's vehicle.
At least two, I'd say, because there was one in front of me.
Okay. And then this lane over here is what lane is that?
That's the a small lane that you could turn off.
Turning lane?
Yeah, it didn't say, but yes.
Yeah. And so at some point when the shots were ringing out, you just immediately just gassed the car and made a
they got down first.
Yeah, into the turning lane.
Okay. And your testimony here right now, for instance, is that the top was down, but you didn't see.
No, I was looking down because I was initiating changing my seat. So I would thank God I was all face down.
Okay. And when you pulled off and you made that right-hand turn, did anyone shoot at you?
Probably. I honestly don't know. There was a lot of gunshots.
Sure. Did any, after the event had occurred, did you ever observe any bullet holes in your vehicle?
There was no bullet holes in my vehicle.
Was there any shattered windshield as a result of anything happening on the scene?
No.
Now, during that time period, as you're over here behind Suge's vehicle or next to it, did you ever see, can you describe for me what Tupac was doing in the vehicle?
When we pulled up on the side of him and she was talking to Suge, he was relaxed, like sitting in the chair, sitting in the passenger seat. And Suge was relaxed talking to Lauren. Nothing, like there was no engagement.
Okay, so as you're sitting there and you pull up, Tupac was not hanging out the window and doing something out of the window.
Absolutely not, no.
Okay. His torso was not sitting on top of the window yelling to his fans, Tupac, Tupac.
No, there was no fans around. They were just driving in the car listening to music like we were.
Keffe D in his book says that the only reason they knew Tupac was in that black BMW is because he was hanging out the window. So that's what he has said. I think it's really interesting if counsel is going to use this witness's memory to say, see, Keffe, not this witness is wrong. Keffe D was embellishing. Keffe D is making more out of this story. And I imagine he's not going to nail this down anymore because he's going to use it to say, see, Tupac's not trying to draw attention to himself either. Tupac's just kind of laid back in the car. They're all listening to music. And this witness is incredibly credible.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, any questions?
I like this witness.
You do have one? Okay, so what I'll need you to do is write your juror number on the question, and then
Jury question.
write the question on a full sheet of paper.
Here's the thing that's difficult with jury questions. There are some things that jurors might ask that cannot be answered. And so it's not unusual that we are going to see counsel up at sidebar talking to the court about how to answer that question or about whether that question can be asked to the witness. That's why you see counsel up at the bench with the judge. Jurisdictions vary on whether or not jurors ask questions, and jurisdictions vary on whether or not they let jurors ask questions. Some jurisdictions allow it, some don't. Some judges allow it, some don't. It really is courtroom by courtroom, because sometimes jurors can ask questions that can't come in, and then jurors can feel frustrated when their questions aren't answered. And so different judges have different ways that they will decide to do that. So we'll see if the question gets asked.
All right, one question from a juror. Could you gauge what direction the shots were coming from?
No.
No? Any thought? Oh.
All right, the jury question was, can you gauge which direction the shots were coming from? And she said no. We have gone through 2 witnesses for the prosecution. This second witness was an eyewitness of sorts, in that she and her friends that were in the car were in Vegas to go to the Tyson fight. One of her friends in the car knew Suge Knight, and they saw the black BMW that Suge was driving with Tupac in it on the Vegas Strip. They pulled up. Suge said, "We're going to the club, get behind us and follow us." They did that, and then they were going to change drivers because other cars were being weird. She said she didn't understand. There might have been other entourage, et cetera, et cetera. So she was going to switch driving with her friend. This witness came across incredibly credible to me with, look, I'm the more aggressive driver. I knew where we were going. I knew where Club 662 was. So that's what we were going to do. And when she was looking down and unbuckling her seat, that's when she heard gunshots. She said she grabbed her friend who was the driver and pushed her head down. They got down. She pulled the car into drive and yelled at her friend, the driver, to just go, 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 and to get down the strip and turn off the strip as soon as they could. And then eventually they came back to see what was going on, and then were out of their car, sitting on the curb in their designer clothes, waiting for law enforcement to ask if they had seen anything. She remembers a white 4-door vehicle that they almost hit as they were trying to get out and get away from the gunshots.
Did you get called out for a shooting that happened, ultimately determined to be happened at Flamingo and Koval?
Yes. Sergeant Manning called me. It was about 12:30 in the morning, and I was asleep, so it would have been September 8th. And so it was around 12:30. So by the time I got up, got dressed, and got there, it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning on the 8th. From what I recall, I went over to Flamingo and Koval to kind of look at the scene, but they had some witnesses from the car that supposedly was directly behind Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur back at Harmon and the Boulevard that I needed to interview.
Essentially, what was the facts you were dealing with?
Well, according to the witnesses that I had interviewed, Frank Alexander, Malcolm Greenidge, Katari Cox, and Yafu Fula, and I'm just doing what I remember the pronunciation was. They were in the car behind Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur, and what they described was that a white car, and from what I recall, they described a white Cadillac pulling up alongside Knight's car, and someone inside that white Cadillac opening fire or shooting into the car that Knight and Shakur were at. Their descriptions varied a little bit, but from what I recall, I believe they all said it was a white car, and more or less agreed it was a Cadillac.
After speaking to the witnesses, did you have any suspect information?
The only thing we had was 2 to 4 people, probably already all black males. The shooter, all we had was a black arm. There was a question of whether it was out the driver's door window or out the back window. There was a lot of questions, and this was strictly coming from the 4 gentlemen, Alexander, Greenidge, Cox, and Fula, from the car that was behind them. You got to realize, as I learned later, there was an entire convoy or entourage, whatever you want to call it, that had been behind them. And none of those people were around. Everybody had skedaddled before we got there, or at least by the time I got there. And
I would imagine they were halfway back to LA, or at least some of them were.
Did you make efforts to talk to Suge Knight?
I know that night at the hospital, Detective Franks attempted to, he said. And then I know that...
How'd that go?
For 2 to 3 days after that, we attempted to, and finally were able to get him in and conduct an interview with him.
How'd that go?
How did that come about? How does Suge Knight wind up at Metro?
Well, the first couple of attempts weren't very successful, put it this way. He didn't want to come, he didn't come in.
Shocking.
In fact, I think the one time he was supposed to come in, he didn't show up. And then the night he did, I think it was 3 nights after, it would be in the report. When he did arrive, he showed up with David Kenner, David Chesnoff, and George Kalisis, who were all 3 attorneys who were his representatives, which we thought was weird because
he rolled deep with attorneys.
Was a victim. And I think Reggie Wright Jr. might have been.
But wasn't Suge either out of custody before? He was either violating pretrial release or probation. So even though he was a victim, it doesn't surprise me that he was rolling in with all of his lawyers. That surprises me absolutely none.
Been out in the lobby waiting. And then that's when we were finally able to conduct a taped interview of Suge Knight with his 3 attorneys present.
And what were your impressions from that interview?
Suge Knight was not the Suge Knight I expected. Everything, we had done a lot of research in the short time we had been involved, and Suge Knight was not a very timid person in the previous interviews we had seen of him. He was a very boisterous, in charge kind of guy. He was very timid. And to us, his
rattled?
interview was very practiced, and he was very timid, and I thought he lied.
Oh, so not rattled. He just came in. Well, I guess it could have gone 2 ways. It sounds like Suge didn't roll up there and say, hey, fuck all you guys. But I think this interview was probably before Tupac passed, which might have also changed what Suge wanted to say in the interview. But I think the interview was practiced and he lied. I am shocked. I mean, I guess that's a different approach than fuck you, I'm not saying shit. But either of those outcomes don't surprise me.
Was there a problem at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department of information related to your investigation being leaked publicly?
Well,
oh boy, that was a big sigh.
I became aware that there may have been some information being leaked. I couldn't say who specifically was doing it, but I was becoming concerned to the point that in our office we had shelves not behind my desk, but there were some shelves where a lot of the case files were stored. And once this case continued and I you know, the nature of who the victim was, especially when he passed away, there seemed to be a lot of interest in it, outside interest, especially with the media. And
not just
I
the
became
media.
concerned about it. So I started locking my case files in my desk because I didn't want them to be available. Because I had left things on my desk, and a couple times I had found things different than when I left them. And it just bothered me. So that's why I locked them up.
You don't say. People were snooping.
Did there come a point in time when you started saving your reports to a different type of medium than just the computer?
Well, yes, there were some reports that I ended up not sending off to records because I was putting them on what we had then was called a floppy disk. I guess today they've got a lot different technology.
Yeah, back then they were floppy disks.
But back then we had a thing called a floppy disk. Because we actually did some reports early on that I still don't know where they are. We did a pen register early on that I guess nobody can find. We did, we went looking for a vehicle on another guy that nobody can find. There's just a lot of things that disappeared. And some of them are reports that were before I even put them on floppy disk. So yes, I had some concerns.
Were you aware that some Metro employees sold a Polaroid?
Someone sold what?
That some Metro employees sold a Polaroid of Tupac on the autopsy table to the Daily Mail.
What?
I was, after we did the autopsy, I was outside the autopsy room. I cannot say that I saw a person take the Polaroid photo of Tupac Shakur's body. I saw somebody walk into the autopsy room where his body.
A lot of chat is saying, I remember that. I don't remember that. What the fuck?
Was at with a Polaroid. And then I don't remember how long after that a book was published by a Kathy Scott that had, it was a Polaroid photo of his body. It wasn't one of our photos of his body from the autopsy. It was quite obvious it was a Polaroid photo afterwards because it was not a photograph that we took. We didn't take those kind of photographs at an autopsy. We had no reason to.
But needless to say, you yourself had concerns about the security of the information as it relates to the investigation. Yes. I want to fast forward to March 9th of 1997. Did you become aware that another famous rapper by the name of Christopher Wallace, also known as Biggie Smalls, also known as Notorious B.I.G., was killed outside the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I remember.
Yes.
And LAPD was responsible for that investigation.
Correct.
At some point, do you have contact with Fred Miller, one of the lead detectives from LAPD?
Yes.
And then shortly thereafter, March 17th or so, did you attempt to contact, well, let me ask you this, did you contact Frank Alexander to do photo lineups?
Yes. Mike Franks and I went down and we met Frank Alexander.
Too many Franks.
If that's what the report said. It was around March 17th down in Orange County somewhere, California. And I had taken probably, I think it was 10 photo lineups that we had prepared. because I had since the shooting and all, Frank had kind of turned around. I think he had gone cross with Death Row Records, and things turned around, and he was willing to meet with us, and that's when I showed him the photo lineups.
When you showed Mr. Alexander these photo lineups, was he able to pick anybody out?
That's the real question.
He said he could not.
And do you know where Mr. Alexander is today?
From what I was told, he committed suicide, so he's deceased.
Were you left with any avenue to further your investigation?
The only thing we ever got was we ended up the revocation hearing for Suge Knight, where I ended up providing a videotape of the
Revocation of bond, bail, probation, or parole. I want to know what revocation.
From the MGM for the DA's office down there.
Let me ask you about that. So, Suge Knight, at the time that he
there we go.
is involved at this fight with Orlando Anderson at the MGM, he is on probation, both federal and state probation in California, correct?
That's the way it was presented to us, yes.
And at that particular hearing...
Notice how concisely this witness answered. Because he probably doesn't have firsthand knowledge of that. He's like, that's what we were told. That's what my understanding is. But answered it very cleanly. That Suge is on both federal and state probation and is on video clear as day trying to stomp somebody. Good Lord.
Did he call a witness in his defense to claim he was trying to stop the fight?
Orlando Anderson was subpoenaed as a witness for Suge Knight, yes.
And
the victim was a subpoenaed witness to testify that Suge was just trying to break it up? Okay.
Did he testify that Suge Knight was trying to help him, not hurt him?
Orlando Anderson, apparently, because I wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but apparently Orlando Anderson testified in court that day that Suge Knight was trying to help him.
And then were you the witness that laid the foundation for the videotape that disputed that testimony at that revocation hearing?
Because I had talked to Orlando Anderson in Compton.
So Orlando was trying to calm things down, is what you're saying?
In the day of the search warrants, and he told me differently. I was there as an impeachment witness in case Orlando decided to tell the story that he did tell. And I testified that Orlando told me otherwise, that Suge Knight and Tupac had basically beat him down pretty good.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Judge, I pass the witness.
I'm very interested in cross.
Examination, Mr. Smith.
That was interesting.
During this time period, as you are putting together these photo lineups, the majority of the individuals that the state identified in each photo lineup are people that are associated with Southside Crips. Would that be an accurate description?
I believe everybody was, I don't remember, was Roger Williams one of them? Because he's not a Crip. He's a Pyru or mob guy. So he's a Blood. But everybody else was a Crip, yes.
Right, and so because you were under the premise that there was a gang war, that the Southside Crips had actually shot at Tupac and Suge Knight because they were Pyru Blood, and so you were identifying just Southside Crips and putting them into photo lineups. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, we were using Crips because that was the information. Again, we were basing a lot of things off the information we were getting from Compton.
Right, and even so, even as you're receiving this information from Compton, even as you sit here right now, sir, you weren't comfortable necessarily with all of the information you were receiving from Compton, right?
We weren't comfortable with certain things in Compton, yes. We witnessed a couple of interview techniques that we weren't comfortable with.
I would love to hear more.
Yes, now, in addition, as you are having these photo lineups, Did these photo lineups ever go to anyone back in Las Vegas? For instance, we've heard some testimony from some females that were in a vehicle, some other people maybe that would have been at the scene. Were those photo lineups ever shown to anyone that was, like the girls in the Sebring or anything like that?
That's where I'm wondering. I think there was 5 photos later on that are shown, not the original 10. I don't remember the exact number, but there are 5 later photos. And I think I mentioned it during my earlier testimony that we sent to, I believe, someone in LAPD. And I know that of the 4 girls in the Sebring, I only think 1 or 2 said they were willing to look at the photo lineups. And I think photo lineups were sent to LA so they could show them to those.
And do you recall what the results were of those photo lineups being sent to the girls in LA?
I don't believe they identified anybody.
Did you ever have to deal directly with Reggie Wright Jr.?
The only face-to-face, and it would have been brief, would have been at Compton when he brought Malcolm Greenidge in, but I don't think there was any talk. And the reason we probably didn't talk to him was because his dad was a lieutenant at Compton.
And what did that mean to you as to why you wouldn't talk to him because his dad was a lieutenant?
Right, wrong, or indifferent, our feeling was, well, if your dad's a Compton lieutenant and you're the head of Death Row Records security, I just have a problem with the communications line there. Maybe I'm being distrustful on that. I just worry about what's being said between the two.
I think you're right to be cautious.
I'm being distrustful on that. I just worry about what's being said between the two parties.
Were you aware during the course of your investigation that Reggie Wright Jr. instructed his people to lie to you?
I mean, did they even have to explicitly say it?
I was told later on by Frank Alexander that he said that, yes.
In addition to that, we had talked a little bit about the video footage that was captured at the MGM. Did you at any point when you looked at that video footage observe or see Duane Davis, Keffe D, in that surveillance video?
No.
Witness number 3 was the first main investigator or lead investigator in this case who testified via Zoom and had some very interesting testimony about their workings with Compton PD during this case, the fact that all of the witnesses connected to this case were in California, but also had a very good memory of the investigation that they did, the names that they were hearing about who was in the car with Keffe D the night that Tupac was shot. Also, some interesting inside workings on what was going on with regarding the case file. The detective said that there was points where he would come back and things would be moved on his desk, that he started locking up his case file, but there were certain things, including the pen register, that went missing and were never recovered again. And they started saving case files on floppy disk to try to save them in a different way, but that things went missing that prompted him to start locking up his case files in his desk. He also talked about the fact that when things were happening, it got out to the media, including the existence of that pen register, the tracking of what phone numbers a particular phone number is calling, that the existence of that was immediately out in the media, and the leaking of a Polaroid photograph of Tupac Shakur on the autopsy table. He said that that was a photograph that no one from Las Vegas PD or Las Vegas Metro PD took. That's not what they would have taken. That's not how they took photographs. They didn't use Polaroids. So someone took that photo and he recalled it being out in the media. So he also talked about some of the leaks that were going on and started identifying the photos in six-pack lineups of who was who in this case, including the individuals in the car. So we had the faces in those six-packs, even though individuals were not identified in those six-packs. He also was part of an interview with Suge Knight. He stated that Suge showed up with 3 lawyers and seemed to be behaving timid, and that he believed that Suge lied to them in the interview when he said he didn't know anybody, he didn't know anything, and he just couldn't recall anything. So again, starting to see the groundwork laid about what was happening in this case, and then what was happening in the fallout from this case, and then what was happening in the law enforcement investigation in this case, and what challenges were presented there.
Were you one of the 2 detectives assigned initially the investigation into an individual identified as Christopher Wallace, also known as Biggie Smalls, also known as the Notorious B.I.G.?
No, I did not receive the responsibility for the case until approximately 60 days later. We received it from the Wilshire Division, and then we took over the responsibility for the investigation.
During the course of your investigation, did you receive information that a person by the name of Duane Davis might be a suspect in this homicide?
Yes, we did.
And you also receive information that potentially Mr. Davis feels like he's owed money by either Mr. Wallace or Puffy Combs' Bad Boy Records. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
You also learned that he was driving or ticketed on March 8th of 1997, a black 1996 Chevy Impala SS. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Eventually, fast forward to June 20th of 1997, do you and your partner, Detective Poole, wind up having a conversation with Mr. Davis at his lawyer's office, Edie Fall?
That's correct.
And fair to say, though, even though we've been talking about Mr. Duane Davis as somebody that was a potential target for your investigation, ultimately, at the end of the day, he was never charged with the murder of Biggie Smalls, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
Now, in addition to that, fair to say that in your course and scope as a detective, when you do your investigations, you would have ran Mr. Davis's criminal history as part of your investigation, right?
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
Was there any indication on any of his criminal history that he'd ever been arrested or charged or convicted of any violent felony?
I don't recall.
At that
Now, in
time?
addition to that, sir, your testimony here is that you did an investigation on Mr. Davis. Did you ever at any point look into the actual Impala itself? You said it was owned by somebody else, a Patrick Parker. Is that correct?
It wasn't owned by someone other than Mr. Davis, yes.
It was registered
with
to
regard
somebody
to that,
other
did you
than
ever interview Mr. Parker?
Mr. Davis.
I do not recall.
So we are at the end of the day of day 1, the trial for the murder of Tupac back in 1996, 30 years later. And we finally are seeing the first and only trial I think that we will ever see in this case. And we've gone through 4 witnesses today and then an interview. We only went through half of the interview. There's another half of the interview that we're going to see tomorrow. And a lot of you asked in the chat, Emily, how is this relevant? We are early on. Remember, we are building a puzzle and we are at the very, very earliest stages of trial. I'm very curious to see if this particular Impala that they're spending a lot of time on has some significance later on, if there is more to this, and maybe there isn't. And we'll be like, maybe there isn't. But I'm curious to see how this ties in. The things I can tell you about the case are things that we're going to pull from Keffe D's book. And yes, I am going to continue to pull things from Keffe D's book because parts of this will come in. Is this entire book in evidence? No. Will the entire book be in evidence? Probably not, because some of it's just not relevant. But what's really interesting is the defense already set up we're going to question the investigation because we're here to question the investigation, but also, hey, so my client is known to be a bullshitter. It's interesting that he didn't say like my client's a big fish story kind of guy, but my client's known to be a bullshitter. So the things that my client says are hyperbole. So I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. Yes, Suge Knight's on the witness list. Yes, Sean, Diddy, Puffy, P. Daddy, P. Diddy, Combs is on the witness list, among others. So it's going to be an interesting trial. When I saw there was an indictment in this case back in 2023, I know we talked about it then. I was like, this dude's book is going to get him tried for murder. And in 2026, we are now here with this dude's book is going to get him tried for murder. I'm curious to see how the prosecution is going to keep this focused and not allow the tangents to run down. But if I'm the defense, I am going to want to run down all of those tangents. Well, what was Diddy doing? And what about the murder of Biggie? And what about all this other stuff? And then get to the end of the case and say, hey, you heard a lot about Biggie. You heard a lot about Suge Knight. You heard a lot about Tupac. You heard a lot about, and just start naming names. You didn't hear nearly as much about Keffe D, and he's already started to show that a little bit with his cross-examination style. Do you know who's in that photo? Why does that photo even matter? Who are those people? When was it taken? Any of those number Keffe Ds? That car registered to Keffe D? No. And so the defense is already kind of laying that groundwork to say, we've heard a lot about a lot, but you haven't heard a lot about Keffe D doing this. So what are we left with at the end of the day? And so far, I've found the attorneys on both sides easy to follow. The judge is quick and decisive. Knock on wood. Maybe we're going to see a trial where the parties kind of move smoothly through. Court's always going to have some hiccups, but right now it seems like the parties are working pretty well together, and I'm curious to see how that develops. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerd.app.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.